live in a place called Roydon here in Essex. Last summer, during the lockdown, one of our neighbors decided to throw a house party. Yeah, an actual house party in the middle of a pandemic that went on way into the night. Needless to say, my mom and dad weren't best pleased, and I thought it was really selfish of them to do something like that. But anyway, I'm up in my room trying to get some sleep, and all I can hear is music and voices coming from the other side of the road. Like they weren't even bothering to keep the noise down. They were out in the street talking to each other and stuff. It was so annoying. So there came a point where I got so sick of it that I got up out of bed and went to the window to just stare at them disapprovingly. I don't know why I thought that would do any good. None of them could see me, and I wasn't going to stop the party by just staring at it. But I did it anyway, and that's where I found myself for a good few minutes, just sort of watching them aimlessly wander around, slurring their words to each other. Then the next thing I know, a car is pulling up outside the house. I actually start hoping that it's an unmarked police car, come to shut the party down so I could get some sleep. And I think my hopes are confirmed when one of the people inside the car calls one of the partiers over to the window. The bloke stumbles over to the car, and at first it did seem like it was the police, because all he was saying was stuff like, "Who are you anyway? Who's asking? What's it got to do with you?" Then out of nowhere, I hear 4 big bangs and flashes from inside the car. Then the bloke who walked over to the car just falls backward onto the pavement. We don't really have a lot of guns here in the UK. It's not like America, so it took me a minute for it to actually sink in what had happened. That the lads in the car had actually shot the fellow who they'd called over. Oh god, and the noises he was making too. I've never heard someone in that kind of pain before. And these gurgling noises too. I couldn't get those out of my mind for quite a while. I rushed out of my bedroom and told my mom and dad what I'd seen. They'd heard the bangs too, and had rushed downstairs to see what was going on. And when I told them there'd been a shooting, they immediately called 999. It was 100% the scariest night of my life so far. Just hearing those shots come out of nowhere is something I don't think I'll ever forget. But it's the effects of those gunshots that stick with me over everything else. How strong our bodies are, but how fragile they are too. I read in the papers that the guy died in the hospital a few days later after he was admitted. I feel terrible for him, but I'm amazed he even made it that long. From the sounds he was making, I'm surprised he didn't die right there on the pavement outside that house party. I still don't think I'm fully over what I saw and heard that night. I'm sure I will someday, but for now, all it takes is just hearing the word party, and all I can think about are those gurgling noises the guy made, lying on the pavement outside the last party he ever went to. Remember when you were a teenager and one of your friend's parents went away for the weekend? The excitement was palpable, right? In fact, I'm pretty sure when teenagers hear their parents say weekend away, a series of events are set in motion that will inevitably end with their family home being trashed by drunken pubescents. So back when I was 19, word came down that a friend of a friend was having a house party on a Friday night. Now this was past the point where the first few house parties had ended with various kids being grounded for life and all that. So the emphasis was on making sure word didn't spread, so the party wasn't crashed by strangers, psychos, and strange psychos. Somehow, some way, News of the party was kept to a minimum, and when myself and a few mates arrived at the house late on Friday evening, it was actually kind of chill. So for a few solid hours, we chatted, drank, smoked, and showcased music to each other through the auxiliary cable hooked up to a small but powerful iPod dock. A few hours later, I'm getting pretty tired, feeling worse for wear after a few cans of cider, so I decided to call it a night early. I say early, it's about midnight at that point, and my mates aren't nearly ready to stop drinking, so I head home alone. It's a short, quiet walk, and I climb into bed pretty much the moment I get home. A few hours later, I honestly couldn't tell you what time. I got a phone call. I roll out of bed, annoyed at whoever the hell has decided to call at such an ungodly hour. The caller ID says it's my friend Tom, who had also been at the house party. When I pick up and ask him what he wants, he tells me that Mike is dead. Mike is a mutual friend who'd been at the party too. I can hear people muttering in the background, almost like they're trying to keep their voices down. So my first thought is that it's a prank of some kind, and a bad one at that. I remember telling him pretty clearly that I didn't think that was funny in the slightest, before promptly hanging up on him. I got back into bed and fell back asleep. Since I'd arrived home late and pretty drunk, and also had my sleep interrupted by that tasteless prank call, I slept in way late. I remember waking up briefly around 10 a.m., checking my phone, and finding no missed calls or texts. That was what reassured me that it had indeed been an attempt at a crappy prank. If he was for real, surely Tom would have called or texted again, but he didn't. So, yeah, I thought nothing of it. That was until I was woken back up by a knock on my bedroom door. It was my mom, with the kind of serious look on her face that I very rarely saw, if ever. "Get downstairs, right now," she hissed. When I asked why, she looked straight up angry. "Get out of bed, right now, put some bloody clothes on, and go downstairs." I had no idea why I would be in trouble with her, so I was in an awful mood by the time I'd put some pants on and wandered downstairs into our family's TV room. In there, sitting on the couch, were two men, dressed very smartly in suits and ties. That's about the time that Tom's phone call flashed into my mind. There was no way these two things could be connected, but as soon as they spoke, I knew what was happening. "Good morning. We're from Merseyside Police. Your mom said it would be alright if we had a word with you." I was 19, a legal adult. They knew damn well they could just take me down to the station if they wanted to, but they didn't. They were being way too nice, almost as if they were here to give me some very bad news. "Mike is dead, isn't he?" I remember asking. When one of them nodded their head, I felt awful. One of my best friends in the world had tried to tell me something world-shattering, and I'd basically just called him a liar. The police guys asked me a load of questions, basically none of which I had the answers to, since I'd left the party early. When they were done, they thanked me and left, before I immediately got on the phone to Tom to apologize. What haunts me to this day is that the whole thing had gone down just a matter of minutes after I'd left. According to Tom, who I talked to after the police showed up, Tom had said his goodbyes to me, closed the front door to the house, then headed into the kitchen to get another one of his beers out of the fridge. He said he noticed some kind of argument going down around the kitchen table, with a few guys and girls heatedly exchanging opinions, but he didn't think too much of it. What's a little debate between friends? But this was the start of an argument that would end in murder. Mike, the guy in question, had apparently been flirting with a girl he'd known for a while. However, this girl happened to have a boyfriend. Mike apparently didn't know this at the time, and was defending a little harmless flirting while the girls were telling him how wrong he was to have such a casual attitude about it. Whatever happened, the girl he'd been flirting with had actually called her up her boyfriend, who lived just a few streets away, to tell him all about it. Now, I hasten to add that she was in no danger at all. Mike wasn't a creep or a perv by any stretch of the imagination, so the only reason she'd opted to call her boyfriend was to cause drama. Apparently, the boyfriend was a bit of a psycho anyway, and the girl called him knowing damn well he'd overreact and try to start a fight or something. Only he didn't choose to start anything at all. He chose to end something that night. Mike's life. It was actually Mike who answered the door when the boyfriend arrived, and all it took was a simple little, "Are you Mike?" for the boyfriend to realize that this was the guy he was looking for. But instead of shouting at him, shoving him, or even throwing a punch his way, the boyfriend took out a butcher's knife and plunged it into Mike's chest. The way Tom tells it is absolutely harrowing. Mike had run through the house, running on pure fear and adrenaline, with blood practically pumping out of a hole in his chest. The adrenaline was enough for him to actually scale the brick wall at the back of the house before he collapsed and died in an alleyway, surrounded by his terrified friends. This was all right about the time I was walking home on a quiet March night, feeling at peace with the world. I thought it was just another quiet spring night, but I was walking away from a murder scene. I was all chill, getting into bed, thinking everything was right with the world. And meanwhile, my friend was bleeding to death in a freezing alley. And that's something I don't think I'll ever get over. Last summer, I went to a house party in the Garryowen neighborhood of Limerick here in Ireland. We were right in the middle of lockdown restrictions, and I know it was really stupid and selfish of me to go, but I was just so in need of a stress release. I'm a really social creature, and I need to spend time around people. Like I was actually going mad being stuck inside all on my own. I do actually really regret going, but breaking COVID restrictions aren't the reason I wish I hadn't gone. Because I saw one of the worst, most horrifying things I've ever seen in my life at that party, and it's something I don't think I'll ever get out of my head. So the house party is going swimmingly for a few hours, and I'm occupied being a little social butterfly that I am. But then I walk into the kitchen to get another drink, and this big argument is unfolding between this couple that seemed to be based around allegations of infidelity. It was super intense and awkward being in there with them, so I just quietly grabbed my bottle of wine from the fridge and then head back to where I was gabbing away with some new friends. I didn't really think much of it. House parties can be weird like that after all. One room people are passed out, another one has people dancing around. Some rooms host little arguments between couples that usually don't turn into something hideous. Only this one did. The guy in this argument storms out of the party, and then for a few hours, everything is good vibes again. But then at some point later in the night, the guy comes back to the party. People know his face by the point, so they really don't have any reason to not let him in, and I'm guessing he didn't give them any clue as to what he was about to do. Otherwise, they'd never have let him back into the house. The guy then searches the house to find the girl he'd been arguing with. I'm not actually sure if they were a couple, I just heard them arguing about sleeping around. When he finds her, he confronts her, starts screaming at her, then reaches into his jacket, takes out a bottle, and then appears to douse her with the contents. People thought he was just being a dick and throwing vodka on her. The outrage partially stemming from the wasted alcohol, as well as the undue aggression. He then legs it from the room while she's screaming. From the people I've spoken to about it, the one who were in the room when it happened, they first thought her screaming was her being a bit melodramatic about having a drink chucked on her. But then she took her hands away from her face, and it's covered in what looked like burns. It wasn't alcohol he'd thrown onto her face that night. It was acid. Luckily, someone there was a chemistry graduate. They realized what was happening almost straight away, and then grabbed something from under the kitchen sink that would neutralize the acid. I don't know what it was exactly, but was some other chemical that probably didn't do her much good either. But it definitely stopped the damage being any worse than it was. I heard the poor girl had to have a skin graft from her leg though. Like, even with the help she got, her injuries were absolutely horrific. The bloke who did it went on the run for a bit too. Like the Gardaí, what we call the police in Ireland, didn't manage to get the cuffs on him for like a month, and we were all so relieved when they finally did. I can't imagine what kind of a monster does something like that after an argument. I don't care what it was over. To use actual acid to try permanently disfigure someone's face, that takes a really special kind of evil, don't you think?